Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the next conversation here with CMG Consulting. We're going to dig into some good topics today on strategy and execution and the role that insights play in all of that. I've got my colleagues Kim Scribner and Ray Taylor here, two great minds to dig into this topic. And so let's get to it. I think for me, the role of strategy in guiding actions can't be understated, right? You've got to have fence lines. You've got to have the ability for people within the organization to make choices about what's going to move things forward in the direction that we want and what's not. I think within that, how an organization pays attention to its environment, pays attention to the way it's serving its customers, pays attention to its performance, all factor in both to the articulation of strategy and the calibration of it, and then ultimately how everybody acts on it. And so I'll use that as sort of a stimulus, and maybe start with you, Ray. Kind of how do you come at this set of challenges with the clients you work with and helping them?
Yeah, to me, the ability to strategize, kind of distinct from the ability to execute it's really about developing a vision and a plan that's both informed and at the same time inspiring, right? Because you've got to marshal people, to move in a particular direction, and they have to understand the reasons why, and they have to understand the part that they're going to play. It's incredibly important. So we're not just writing plans, right? Just putting words on paper. It's gotta be a credible kind of action oriented, informed by insight rich, right? View and perspective that people can believe in, that there's some ethos behind, at the corporate and leadership level. It's something that really separates, I think, really, powerfully, able to strategize firms from others. Some of the best strategies that I've seen are really kind of anchored in, what we call powerful insights at CMG, which is a broad array of kind of fact-based decision making. But we have to think about it in terms of you've got to combine kind of data, market intuition, customer truth. There's a lot of things that kind of go into this bucket, right? A variety of elements, and that help shape and frame the way that an organization is like viewing itself today and the future that's possible for it, right? And so if you don't have those kinds of insights, I think it's really hard to call it a strategy. I think it's really just more, I don't know, hope in a like bullet point form or something like that. But I think it's really a key element that firms have got to kind of dial in on and focus on.
I love that last part, right? Because hope is not a strategy, right? And so even a book it's called that. So I think it's right on point. And when you were talking about, talking to people about why that strategy is the right one, right? That helps people see themselves in the work, and that helps create the passion that you were talking about, right? Folks have to feel like they can see themselves in the work so that they're motivated to have an impact on their customers.
Mm-hmm.
The two of you, Ray, you used the term inspire. Kim, you just talked about motivating. And for me, insights can help craft strategy itself. They play a crucial role in getting people to buy in. And I think that's, part of the topic for today is how it's not just data. It's not just the rare leader who stands up and gets everybody pumping their fist in the air. This idea of how we can serve others. It's an inherently human thing to want to do right by other people, generally. And the role of insights, testimonials, quotes, first person sort of statements, having customers come and stand up in front of a town hall, not just leaders. All of those start to add color and meaning that to me helps an organization and the people within the organization truly buy in. And I see you nodding your head, Ray. I'm just going to pass it back to you because I'm guessing you've got some perspective there that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's important to be able to distinguish between, when the organization you're in is defining a path that's more vision and less connected to the day-to-day versus one that's more locked in and understanding where you've come from and how you've gotten there. So when we think about, organizations using powerful insights, it's really a lot about kind of understanding that, you know, people that are, the feet on the street, right? The tires on the road that are making it happen every day. They live and breathe the work that they do. So they understand the minutia and the details, right? And they can sniff out when a strategy isn't, fully linked or is reflective of the reality that they experience on a day-to-day basis. And so I think, I have an example, just something that I can recall from my own background. I mean, there was a time where, I was building a segmentation, for a big multinational conglomerate. And the focus that we had was on defining the places on a B2B basis where folks were, how did the market break out and where was the biggest growth opportunity for us? And something that we found was that there was a very tiny but highly influential and highly profitable segment that was really driving a lot of brand perception that we weren't really aware of and the leadership had no kind of idea of. And being able to focus on that segment in a very meaningful way, knowing not only where they were coming from, but where they wanted to go and how our product and our brand kind of fit into that story was really meaningful for addressing that one segment. But it actually opened up a ton of opportunities in adjacent segments as well.
Yes.
Because of the influence that they had. And I think if you're not using powerful insights constructively, you miss those kinds of notes and it really hampers your effectiveness.
I saw Kim start to smile on some of that. So
yeah,
come
like
on.
the powerful insights have to surround the readiness and execution part of the organization, right? So you're going to segment, you're going to create your strategy, you're going to do all of the upfront work. Then you have to actually align on that's the right thing to do, start executing on it. And then the next part of powerful insights comes back in to measure our results to tell us, well, were our upfront insights correct, right? So it's almost like that middle part is the experimentation engine that's confirming that your insights were valid so that you can then feed the learnings back into the engine. And it just continues on in that cycle and they have to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's an element here of, the term powerful that for me implies sufficient and useful, right? And there's a sweet spot. It's a little bit of a Goldilocks thing for me from one end of the spectrum, an organization that is incredibly naive because they don't pay attention or measure anything, to the other end of the spectrum where there's analysis paralysis because anything that can be measured is being measured. And usually that's not where powerful insights come from. That's where lots of thick reports come from. But if we can, hold on to this concept of power, right? That's where we want to know enough to make a choice without regret. And we want it to be a choice that drives action and further development and evolution. Your example, Ray, of a small segment that had an outsized influence, reminds me of a luxury brand that I did some work with that was looking into the influencer space. And what they determined was the influencers they were serving were their consumers. They had not made that connection. So as they were going out and talking to influencers, they started noticing everybody already owned their stuff. Mm-hmm. And that became a powerful insight, which was they would inspire others by saying, hey, if you want to be like me, here's what I buy. Right. So it became this one little sort of light bulb went off and it changed their advertising. It changed how they did, online content. It changed how they sold in, their outlets. Really profound impact. And it didn't require an excessive amount of data analytics. It was coming back to this idea of almost a fulcrum that says once we understood this, then things started to shift in a positive way.
Yeah,
for sure. I want to come back for a second to the measurement part, right? Like there can't be too many measures. That analysis paralysis part that you mentioned, Gary, organizations get into that really quickly. So measure what matters, But also there's Goodhart's law, which talks about how a measurement can become a target, right? So you don't
Yes.
want to incentivize bad behaviors by the people inside your organization in order to hit a specific target. So measurement can be a tricky thing when you're dealing with people being asked to do something as well.
Yeah. And like just to expand on the point a little bit, because there's a marked difference between companies that are kind of data oriented and fact based, that are successful in setting and executing strategy. They tend to be, they tend to measure a lot of stuff internally, right? But they're not publishing all of that to everyone, right? Because what you can't do is expect everybody in the firm to, kind of maintain constant, vigil around 38 different, KPIs, right? So you've got to understand that you've got a team that's focusing on those details, because we also know that it's not about just outcomes, but it's about process, and it's about kind of constantly refining and improving that process. So all of the that things that have to happen upstream of the outcome, that you're understanding your capabilities in each one of those areas. And that requires a tremendous amount of analysis and tracking. But you can't constrict the entire organization by focusing on all those things, right? Those things have to be looked at, and they have to have people that are doing them, and doing their jobs. But you've got to be able to then package that so that you can inform the executive audience, you can inform kind of the leadership audience, and keep everybody moving at the right pace in the right direction. Because you're never going to achieve perfection, but you've got to strive for perfection, and that's where the data analytics and the data capture and the data interpretation and all those insights that come along with it come into play.
And that interpretation part, right? Understanding that if you pull one lever, it could impact another, right? So without having that kind of dashboard to see those, responsivenesses to each other, you're losing information.
I'm curious in this sort of space and getting from strategy to execution and the role of insights, to get your perspective almost from the front line of how you diplomatically engage with clients who may have an opportunity to shift their behaviors in this way. How do you advocate for this? What kind of words do you use? What are some tips and tricks there to help leaders actually get to that aha moment of, oh, the powerful insight is actually an accelerator, and actually have that sort of high level buy-in that then starts to cascade through the rest of the organization? You're both staring at
Ready,
me.
you
I'm
want
going
to
to go,
take this
Kim.
one first? Yeah. So I think oftentimes I'm working with organizations who are really new in their journey to using data at all. And so
Okay.
they either have it's disorganized, it's not in a way where they can understand it. So they're not at powerful insights yet. They're just at like, let's start talking about data. And so oftentimes we'll put in place like, we're going to have a metrics conversation once every week, once every 2 weeks, whatever the right frequency is for that organization, so that people even start talking about data. Because often organizations who, are more legacy based and have just, we're trotting along and we're looking at revenue maybe as our only number. Well, what are the things that are contributing to that revenue in these times? And so they're like so early in their point of introspection. They're not at the powerful insights moment yet. They're at just how do we make sure we're asking questions, which I think is the first part of getting to powerful insights, is just creating an environment where people are asking, is this actually impacting the result that we want?
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
And, I think about this through the lens of, when we help firms do strategic planning, for instance, it's that light bulb moment that you can kind of see happen in the client's eyes when we're going through a process of helping them identify and kind of crystallize the accomplishments that they want to achieve in the future. But doing the hard work of helping them ladder that back in terms of how do you know that you've actually done that thing, right? Because there's going to be a report somewhere, there's going to be some data somewhere that illustrates that achievement was done. And sometimes they're really straightforward, like revenue or things, but there are going to be some very kind of minutia driven, very detail oriented things as well. And that when we start walking them back from the long term strategic vision to the practical things that are happening in their business today and what needs to be adjusted in their operating plans in order to achieve those strategic goals, that's the moment where I think we see for the first time kind of that linkage and the connective tissue. Those synapses start to fire, and then there's a real recognition around what's important in the business that I need to be paying attention to as an executive that oversees this particular function, right?
It opens a curiosity by everybody, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And this is why I think, Ray and I kind of ebb and flow in these different points in a client's journey when they're engaging with us is, you know, using information to create an insight, then figuring out how to execute on it, then measuring it again, then making sure you're taking that information, feeding it back. Like you, you want to know what the number is you're trying to impact. You want to be able to measure that you're impacting it, but then you also have to take the next step and like, how did we do it? Because if you don't understand the how we got there, you're not going to be able to replicate it. So all those things have to work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not a silver bullet. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of steps and a lot of people, right?
Yeah. So to answer your question, Gary, like, how do we do that? We start small. Like sometimes it's just like helping a client start with a really small question to kind of show how these things all operate together so that they want to scale that to other groups and use information in other ways.
I love that. And one of my favorite small questions always starts with how might we? To me, it's the safe instigation to leaders. How might we connect measurement of our operational performance to delivery for our customers? How might we assess the relative loyalty or commitment to our offer that our customers have versus our competition? Because to the point that you made, Kim, around curiosity, we want people to be curious. We want them to be asking themselves questions and then asking others questions that continue to evolve insight. And I think to a point that both of you touched on, organizations are comprised of lots of different people and lots of different actions. And the coordination of that, the orchestration of that in some harmony benefits from the concept of being iterative and continually, striving to improve. And we don't always get it right, but, without those questions, I think there's a human tendency to settle into a groove. And when I go into a client engagement and I hear leaders saying, well, we know, right? We know is the death of curiosity. And so I usually kind of try to note that, and that's where I'll sort of press a little with the how might we questions. Mm-hmm. If we know, how might we validate that? If we know, how might that have evolved over time? And get people to sort of come a little bit out of their comfort zone or their sense of sureness into this space of not doubt, but curiosity that says, oh, okay, if the world continues to evolve and change, maybe we'll benefit from paying attention. Mm-hmm. So,
and then I think there's something about, the way in which, people are is also the way organizations are. And I think in a lot of ways, people want specific instructions. They want to know what the answer needs to be, and they want to put their head down and they want to drive, right? And it's human nature in a lot of ways. And I think that when you go through a process that can be as arduous as strategic planning, right? For instance, on a leadership team, on an executive team, right? Those things, they tend to produce answers to really key questions. And then the organization really wants to kind of diffuse those kind of directions and guidance into their day-to-day operations and put their head down and run. And I think something that's really important about that process is it's important to do that, but you've got to build in the capability to assess where you are. And so you've got to have a habit, right? As an organization to be able to say, are we still solving the right problem? Are we still doing what we thought we were going to do, right? Because we you could think about all the individuals in a company as having their own kind of individual lines. And at the beginning of the formation of this is what you now need to go do with your strategic plan, magically everybody's moving in the same direction, but over time things come undone and unmoored, and now people are running in multiple directions. We've got to be able to have a mechanism to correct for that, right? So we don't want to lose sight of whether the markets, customers, businesses, competition are acting in ways that we had expected. We want to be able to course correct, right? We want to be able to correct what we've done, but we also want to be able to react to the dynamics of where organically the market's headed. So you got to build in times for these strategic pauses. And I feel like it's really important that quarterly reviews, kind of midstream, like just set checkpoints. Are we where we need to be? And is everybody still in lockstep? Because I think it's a really affirmative conversation that needs to happen and to be done in order for organizations to change quickly and effectively.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I love those sort of moments of accountability that are the waypoints on the journey. Because, again, going back to a theme that maybe Kim and I have talked about in other venues, right? The ability to be somewhat agile, to recalibrate, redirect, adjust, emphasize or lean into opportunities or pull back where you see, risks and threats arising. Those are all better when we get back to this idea of powerful insights. And the insights might be about a new direction. They may be about performance. They may be about emerging capabilities. There's a wide palette there. But without paying attention to them, we lose the ability to actually take action on our strategy. And I can't emphasize enough, Ray, the thing that you said. Are we still solving the right problem? Right? That sort of self-reflection and recommitment in most cases that's affirming is a great motivator unto itself. We looked at this. Hey, everybody in the organization, it's still the opportunity we need to pursue, right? Those become kind of motivational feedback loops that I think can't be underemphasized.
I think they have to be at a very rapid time cycle, though, right? So even quarterly is not habit forming enough, right? So in order for something to become a habit, it almost has to happen every single day. And so the way I've seen teams kind of incorporate this is if a team is demonstrating the work they've done, whether it doesn't matter if they're using Scrum or whatever practices, as a team is sharing something with you as a leader in the organization, if you can ask them, tell me how this aligns to solving this organizational strategy we have or thing we're trying to achieve, you are constantly reinforcing that alignment. And that's your job as a leader.
Yeah. Constantly, I'm grinning. I'm having a little PTSD about teams coming in and, team members saying, oh, I'm so busy. I'm overwhelmed. Well, let's talk through what are the things on your plate, right? What is it? Maybe there's some things that we can take off your plate or just ignore. And that, even that moment is a powerful insight because for many folks, they don't realize that they have that sense of agency to say no.
Yep. There's insights outside and inside the organization, and we have to use all of them, right? So, we have to understand where we're spending our time because if it's on the wrong things, then we won't be impacting the measures that we want.
Right. Yeah, and absolutely. Like people are wired a way to they're going to feel busy all the time, right? I don't know the last time I talked to anybody at work that didn't say times were crazy and their schedule was screwy, but I think as a leader, it's really important that you can level set that, busyness is what we're focused on, right? We definitely want to be engaged in moving, the organization in the direction we all agreed on, but it's the things you're spending time on, to Kim's point, and making sure that that has the right amount of alignment so that the process that you're using and any process reengineering that's occurring from what you were doing yesterday to what you're doing tomorrow is completely in tune such that those process changes are producing the outcomes that you're looking for, or at least delivering outcomes that are closer to what you're looking for so that you can course correct and move that over time.
Yeah, I love this topic. Any sort of wrap up thoughts or things that we maybe haven't surfaced in this dialogue that you're like, you know what, I want to make sure people hear this because it's important?
Something, if I can jump in quickly, Kim, you may agree with me, but you may have a actually better point. But I get trapped a lot in conversations because I and my team have a lot of comfort in kind of grasping and wrestling with like large, complicated data sets, first party or otherwise, right? And we have a lot of comfort in kind of technology tools and things that help us kind of figure out what true north is, with those complicated data sets. So a lot of times we can get pigeonholed into, what is it that's happening and what should we be doing? And I never want my clients to lose sight of the fact that there's a lot that goes on between determining how successful you've been and what success looks like going forward. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of IQ points, there's a lot of EQ points that are wrapped up in your ability to effectively not only understand where you've come from, but discern where you're headed in the future. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of what, if I'm focused on helping somebody navigate that change, it's going to be in really clear isolation of the KPIs, absolutely. But a really, I think, robust assessment of the processes people are using that are generating the organic outcomes that they've got, right? And some of that's marketing investment. Some of it's like, what's my digital marketing strategy? It's like, how many people are involved in these workflows? And like, so as we're introducing new tools, what are the workflow re-engineering, benefits that can be gained, right? As you leverage some of these newer tools, people's roles change, right? And opportunities grow for the organization. I think it's really important that you can evaluate those processes to really determine whether or not an organization has like the velocity at which they're adapting to the strategic, vision is something that you can measure, right? It's because you can evaluate qualitatively the ability for this team to have done this before and now need to do this now, and their processes have had to change. How effective have they been at migrating those processes? Because that's the primary feature to delivering the outcomes. And I think that's something that's really important. It's not just the numbers, but it's kind of how the hand fits in the glove across a multitude of these points, and the people are critically important in that.
Love it.
When you have an insight that tells you to do, this would be kind of my wrap on that, Raised. When you have an insight that tells you we need to start doing something differently, that doesn't mean you just start doing it in addition to all of the other things, right? Yes. You've got to be efficient and realistic in what your organization can and cannot accomplish. Otherwise, you're going to create a lot more anxiety among the humans that have to do those things, and you'll burn people out. And you'll deliver, but you'll deliver through heroics, and that's not sustainable.
Right. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I think that's a great sentiment to draw a line under, and thank you both for this session. Always love these topics, always love learning from smart folks like you, and appreciate it. Onward.
Super terrific.
Great day.
Thanks.